intent of this topic is to talk about unspoken expectations, right? So Pitfall Harry had a lot of things that was out to get him, but he didn't necessarily know it until he knew it, right? Which I feel is the same thing with respect to expectations. So to kick us off, there's some sheets of paper on the table, and what I'd like you to do is this is a silent activity, and what I would like for you to do is think about a few different questions, and I'll pause on each one. I want you to jot down the first thing or two that comes to your mind, that flashes through your head when I ask these questions. So first of all, think about a team that you're on. Maybe it's your work team, right? If you're a team of one, probably not going to be helpful, right? So think of a team that's larger than just yourself. And so maybe it's a work team, maybe it's a church group, maybe it's a sports team, maybe it's a club that you are associated with, maybe it's the homeowners association, whatever it is, a group of people where you are working towards a common goal, right? How I define a team. So now that you have that kind of in your mind, I'm going to ask these questions of you. And I want you to, again, jot down the first thing or two that comes to your mind. What expectations do you have for your teammates? So what expectations do I have of the people that I work with, right? Not me, but, right? What expectations do you have of your teammates? There's no right or wrong here. Next question, what expectations do they have of you? What expectations do your teammates have of you? And then the last question, what expectations do you have for yourself? What do you expect of yourself on that team? And to just kind of open it up to the group, is it possible to have zero expectations? You'll get varied data if you do some research about expectations. I mean, some psychologists say, well, yeah. Some will say, well, no, you can just lower the expectations. But you can't ever get to zero expectations, maybe. Some will say, no, not even possible. So there's some varying info about expectations and whether you can have zero. I think in the workplace especially, I think it's possible to have no expectations for one another, right? And then for us. You guys agree with that? Yeah? What about is it situational? What about in your families? Starting with children. Those of us that have kids, do we have expectation of our kids? Heck yeah, we do. Right? In fact, in my view, there's some responsibility there. So I have some expectations. What about for your significant other? Do you have expectations for your significant other? Careful. Just saying. Careful, right? And I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it's dangerous stuff, isn't it? It is dangerous stuff. So, a little bit about me. Speaking of expectations, this is my fiancée, Connie. Just want to share a little bit about who I am, what I'm all about. I have no expectations of her, and she has many of me. I'm one of the Agile coaches, as I introduced myself earlier. I'm an IC Agile certified expert coach in Agile coaching. It's about me. So here's a definition, and doing some research about expectations that I find a little bit amusing, but it kind of resonated with me. Expectations are one-sided fantasies that often result in confusion, misunderstanding, and disconnection. I love the one-sided fantasies piece because that's kind of what it is, right? you have this, we talk about kids and everyone will be, yeah, I got kids and I have expectations, right? And yet, my little guy is not so little anymore, but he's 4, I keep thinking, but he's 14 and he looks me right in the eye. The expectations change as they grow up, but oftentimes he has no idea what they are, right? No idea what those expectations are. And that's where it becomes very, very dangerous. And then another bit of research here is from one of my favorite psychologists, Dilbert, Dr. Dilbert, I think. How are you doing on your unspoken objectives? I'm like, what? I'm referring to the goals that I have in mind that I've never mentioned. How are those going? Nailing it. Great. And I think that fit real nicely with the one-sided fantasy. So the pointy-haired boss has this fantasy of these unspoken objectives, and so Dilbert's just dishing it right back. Yeah, I'm nailing those. Right? You've never talked to me about it, so of course I'm nailing them. So when it comes to expectations, let's talk about the science behind it. What's going on in our bodies, in our brains specifically. You guys familiar with dopamine? You'll hear this in a couple other talks, so if you're not familiar with it, I'll give you a little precursor to some of the others. But it's the key neurotransmitter of motivation for learning, focus, productivity, right? What dopamine we have. Some people might call it the happy chemical, right? It kind of boosts our energy, boosts our, we feel good when we have more dopamine. And so when expectations are being met, dopamine gets increased in our brain. And we tend to have a general sense of feeling good about that, right? So when others are meeting our expectations, think about your kids, going back to that. When our kids are meeting our expectations, especially when we don't articulate them, you feel really good about it. You're like, yeah, they're nailing it. They're doing a great job. You feel good about that. When our teammates are doing work and they're meeting every expectation, we feel genuinely good about what's going on. We're proud of them. We may not say it because we're at work. We don't share our feelings, of course. Maybe we should. But the opposite happens when expectations are not being met. And you get a deficiency of dopamine, which in turn, you start to feel some of the same, or exhibit some of the same symptoms that psychologists would term as depression. Right? Things like lack of motivation, fatigue, apathy, mood swings, hopelessness. Right? Hopelessness is one that kind of rung for me, where when expectations aren't being met, you're like, seriously, right? And you feel this sense of, I don't know what else to do, I can't do anything, and I'm going down this wicked path, spiral into the pit that isn't a good place to be. Okay? So just remember, when expectations are met, we have a general sense of feeling good, and when they're not being met, we kind of get into a bad place. Not only emotionally, but if the scientists and psychologists know what they're doing, I'm assuming they do, you feel some physical effect as a result of that as well. Okay? Now, maybe you're not a science person, maybe you're a math person, so let's talk about some math. Who loves math? 2 of you, great. This one's easy, I promise. Expectation minus observation equals our frustration. Does anyone want to take a stab at what that means?
You expect something, you don't observe what you're expecting, then it makes you frustrated.
Yeah, so it's that gap of what I observe and what I expect generates or creates this frustration, sense of frustration for me. The bigger the gap, the bigger the frustration is, right? So what I observe and what I expect, like the difference between the two creates this massive sense of frustration for us. And so it's a bad deal. It is not good for the soul, if you want to say it that way. And which is why some people talk about expectation. If we lower it, then at least I close that gap, maybe, you know? That's one strategy, perhaps. What do you think this parent and these children are feeling right now? They bought these uber expensive tickets to Disney on Ice, and this is what they show up for. They have a different expectation, I would suspect. So what do you think the difference of their observation and their expectation is? It's a big gap. Probably lots of frustration. Mom's probably going, oh my gosh, and trying to shelter the kids perhaps a little bit. So there's a lot of different things going on perhaps for mom than there is for the children. But rest assured, I shouldn't say rest, but assuredly, they neither of them, their expectations are being met here. So what I believe is that we all have a playbook, right? And the problem with, and that playbook contains our expectations of one another. I'm a sports guy, so this worked for me, hopefully it works for you, but we have this written internal playbook of what we expect of others, what we think they expect of us, which is kind of why I asked those questions at the beginning, is to get you thinking about those things. The problem with those playbooks is that they're all a little bit different, right? They're all a little bit different. Our best hope for it is that there's a really large overlap with the people that we're closest to, meaning family, friends, people we work closely with, right? Our best hope is that those are pretty aligned. But oftentimes they're not. And we know this because we see frustration, right? We know they're not aligned. These playbooks are not the same because we live in a world where we get frustrated. Maybe, if I'm being honest, I get frustrated with my son really fast, right? So my observation and expectation, I've got to close that gap, right? So it's how we want things to be, what we expect it to be like. So what if this playbook was published? Maybe I should have put it quotes, but what if it was published per se, right? Meaning, what if everyone knew what is in the playbook? What would our lives be like if that were true? That was a clear question. What would our lives be like if that were true? If we were to publish our playbook, our expectations, how we want things to be? How do you think it would be on your teams? Easier. How come? Less chaotic? And what else is there? What's that? Stress. It might reduce stress. If we remember the math, you guys remember the formula? Expectation minus observation equals the frustration. That frustration might get shrunk if we knew what those expectations were, right? Because then I can observe, and now I know what to expect. It's early for me. But being able to articulate those clearly, without judgment per se, but be able to talk to one another about what we expected. I mean, think again, going back to the children, because that seems to be one of the easiest things for us to discuss for those of us that are parents. I mean, for me, I'm less frustrated when I express what those expectations are. Now he has a chance of meeting those expectations, right? He has a chance. Now, if I've set expectations for him that are not fair, not attainable, there's no way he's ever, there's room for negotiation, hopefully, and some of that. And that's true for our teams when we're working with our teams. Is, you can't possibly expect me to be a whiz kid. Well, you can't expect me to be a kid, but you can't expect me to be a whiz at, say, .NET development or financial analysis. I just, you can't expect that of me. It's not going to happen, right? So you may expect that, and I'm going to go, oh, wait. I'm never going to be that for you. Here's what I do offer. right? And it's not that, it's probably the antithesis of that. And so being able to articulate that, clearly communicate what those expectations are. When do we typically express our expectations? When they're not met, right? You guys remember in school where your teacher or professor gave you the answer key and you're like, yes, this is awesome, because this is all I have to study. This information right here, and I'm going to do well, right? You guys remember that? Yeah, that's awesome, right? It's the same thing. The professor or the teacher's setting the expectation that if you know this, you will know everything I'm asking of you, and you will do quite well. I believe that to be true with our expectations. If I say, this is what I expect, we have some dialogue around that, I think it would go a lot better. Do you guys disagree? Yeah? No? So these things are dangerous, right? We talked a little bit about the unspoken expectation. That seems pretty clear. Sometimes they're a little more subtle, however. Let's take meetings. All of you have meetings at some point during the day? Yeah? Okay. Anyone not have any meetings all day? Yeah. I might set an expectation of you to arrive on time. Seems like a fair expectation, yeah? Want you to arrive on time? Seem fair? So let's say I asked you guys to arrive here at 9 o'clock, or to my meeting at 9 o'clock, and you guys willingly say, yes, that's cool, and then you show up at 9 o'clock. And then we've got people in Madison, we've got people in Eau Claire, we've got people in Highlands Ranch, we've got people in Omaha, and so guess what always happens in those meetings? We never start at 9 o'clock, do we? Because we're all fiddling around with WebEx and trying to get connected with our remote team, right? And so we might start at 9:07. And then I, as the facilitator of said meeting, you're like, dude, why are you so upset? Everybody showed up at 9. Yeah, but we didn't start until 9:07. Oh, so that's a different expectation, right? It's so slightly subtle. My expectation is that we start at 9, not arrive at 9. Does that make sense? It's a little subtle, but it was unspoken. I didn't tell you that. I only told you that when I got frustrated, which is probably not a good idea. Great, now everyone's frustrated, not just me. So that's just a little nuance to unspoken. But there's another kind, I believe, and it's called the veiled expectation. Veiled expectations usually come in the form of questions. The simplest example I can come up with is, let's say, for example, I send out a questionnaire of each of you in this room, and I would say, hey, I'm buying everyone lunch. I'm not, just to be clear. I'm not buying any lunch, right? I just want to set expectations clearly. But hypothetically speaking, if I were to send out a note saying, hey, I'm going to buy everyone lunch, and I want you to tell me what you'd like for lunch. And so you're like, man, this guy's awesome. I am. But, this is really kind. And so you take time and you think about, what do I really want for lunch? And you write it down. And then by the time it gets, from all the way across the room, then, 20 pizzas show up. That's a veiled expectation. I was hoping everybody would say, oh, we'll just make it easy on Chris. Let's just get pizza, it's cool, right? We had all these different types of food. There's no possible way. But I just said, that was a dumb question. I'll just order it. Yet I didn't reset that expectation, right? The expectation I gave you was that you can have whatever you want. So how do you think that goes for you when you have those types of expectations, the veiled expectations? What happens for you when that occurs? Again, a real question. Follow the response. Anyone? Yeah. Almost worse. Like if I were to say to you, hey, look, I'm going to buy pizza. You'd be like, cool. I didn't expect that. That's cool. All right, thank you. Right? Like, even though you had a hankering for Italian food, right? Probably would go over way better than asking you a question and go, you know what, appreciate you taking that time, but never mind. I'm going to go ahead and do what I'm going to do. We experience that in our lives, not only within our teams, but sometimes with our bosses. They ask us a question, we go, they don't say it this way, but, wrong answer, right? That's what it feels like sometimes, I'm going to do this instead, right? If you have an intended answer in mind, go ahead and provide that answer, and then say, what do you think about that? That goes over way better. Hey, I'm going to order pizza. You guys cool with that? That might be a way that you might handle that. So the thing to remember is that you are in control of you. If my expectations are not being met, whose problem is that? The person not meeting my expectation or mine? It's mine. And you've got to be willing to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? And it's hard to do, especially as parents. I keep coming back to that. It's hard for me to go, I had an expectation I didn't tell you about it. And you didn't meet my expectation that you never knew about. Boy, how hypocritical, how awful that would be. And I don't say that anymore. But you're in control of you. Your observation must take precedent over your expectation. So what you see, and then start to adjust what your expectation might be. It all starts with dialogue. When your expectations are not being met, pause. Start to evaluate the situation. Evaluate you, not them. What, was I not clear? That might be a clue. If you ask that question first, was I not clear in my expectation? And then you go, I don't think I ever set that expectation. Wow. Right? Recognize what's going on for you. But sometimes it takes that pause. So when you get frustrated, immediately get curious. Immediately get curious and turn that focus not from the person, not away from the person that's not meeting your expectation. Focus it back on you. Okay? Ask yourself questions. Was the expectation realistic? Was I clear? Did I even articulate my expectation? Ask yourself, what's not working for me? How am I approaching this situation? What could I do different? Why is this causing me frustration? So here's some things that you can do when your expectations aren't being met. Evaluate everything starting with yourself. Like I said, ask yourself those questions. Did I even articulate it? If I did, was I clear? Was the expectation attainable? Was it even achievable, right? Maybe it's not. It's not okay to ask for those things. What could I have done differently to improve the outcome? Brainstorm. If you're in a team situation where you're constantly frustrated, brainstorm. Talk about those expectations. How can we get on the same page here? How can we reveal and publish our playbook, right? We have them. You may say, no, my expectations are low of my teammates. Maybe, but it's probably a good idea for them to understand how low they are as far as what expectation you're setting for them. It's also good for you to be open to their expectations of you. Write them down and talk about them continually. Maybe do them in the form of working agreements. You guys have working agreements in your teams? Yeah? You guys don't like to move a whole lot. I mean, this is cool. We're going to change that. What else can you do when your expectations aren't being met? What's that? Lower them. How about on the team? If I say I want awesome output from you, I just want mediocre output from you, right? I get what you're saying, and I agree to an extent, but be careful with lowering that expectation. I'm with you. Thank you. Communication. Yeah. And it's a constant dialogue. It's a constant dialogue with one another. Just like any working agreement that you make with your teams, with the people that you're closest to, setting those expectations and then talking about them continually. Because guess what? We change as people. Going to your point about lowering them, yeah, if I'm brand new to .NET, I'm probably not awesome at it yet. And so, you know, but you should continue to raise the bar as I continue to learn, whatever it might be, right? That's okay, but set the expectation appropriately. So remember those expectations that you wrote down at the beginning when I asked you, what do you expect of your teammates? What do they expect of you? What do you expect of yourself? How many of you have clearly articulated those things to your teammates? This might be one where I'm okay if you don't raise your hand if you don't want to admit it. Right? But if we're being honest, I think some of those things on that list you probably haven't articulated. I don't want to call any of you out, Nathan, but whatever. Is that what you're to do? Good. So, how many of you, if you have any of those, my challenge to you is to bring this information back to your teams, sit down with your teams, and have a session that talks about expectations of one another. Again, think about publishing that playbook, talking about what those things are, and start from forget yesterday, start from today, but start with new expectations of one another and start building on that. And I think it's okay to raise the bar as we progress in our skill sets and how we interact with one another. Continue to raise that bar and challenge one another. But you've got to start with communicating it. And having said that, what are your expectations for Agile Camp 2018? Take a moment, if you would, be so kind. Take a moment, maybe jot down things that are sticky, and on your way out, maybe slap it on the wall there, not on your friend's back, there's not one on me, is there? But write it down, throw it up there, maybe in a few words, your expectations of Agile Camp. And then the other thing I'm going to ask you for is, as we close, if you would, please provide some feedback. Thank you very much.
And if anyone's looking for the restrooms, they're over there.
Restrooms over there. Hot unit out there.